Hi, comic book fans. Welcome to another suddenlycomics.com video. We've got a special episode today. I'm interviewing Scott Harris King, otherwise known as the Classic Comics Collector on YouTube. I think that's correct. Scott is a comics entrepreneur. He is the writer, artist, publisher, distributor of his own series of comics. I met Scott on the weekly chat show a month or so ago, I liked what Scott was telling us about his comics, and I've actually got a bunch of his comics here in the UK, some of which I'm going to be selling, and some of which I'm going to be keeping. I'd like to talk to Scott about his comic career, and I'm going to start off, Scott, by doing something you've done to people, and I'm going to ask you, what is your origin story?
Well, first, thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate it very much. So my origin story is maybe a little unusual. I'm not sure, but I had sort of, when I was a kid, I had seen comics as a form in the newspaper, comic strips, and I had, so I'd read comics as an art form, but I had never actually read a comic book, right? Like a traditional comic book. And one day my parents decided to join a weekly bowling league. And so they would, every week they'd go and they'd bowl. And since, I'd have to go with them and just sit there while they were bowling for a couple hours. So they gave me some money to entertain myself with. And I went to this market, and they had comic books. And so I decided to buy a couple comics. My first issues were Black Hawk 269 and 270.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so this is in 1984 when I was 10 at the time. And I went home and I wrote out a checklist of Black Hawk issues and crossed off those two and put them in a folder. So as soon as I read my first comic, I was immediately collecting.
Oh, you were immediately into collecting. You already started the list.
Yeah, as soon as I finished reading them, I was in, and I've been in ever since. And just something clicked with me. I knew right away that this was like something that I loved. I wanted to collect them. I wanted to write them. I wanted to draw them. And so, yeah, it was an immediate thing. It wasn't like a gradual. It was just like right away. As soon as I saw it, I knew this is it for me.
The road to Damascus thing, the light suddenly shone.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Except in this case, it was a Dan Spiegel cover of a giant skeleton with a swastika on it, crushing the earth.
Oh,
so it's a little bit different.
Close enough. Close enough. Okay, right. So that was when you were 10.
Yeah.
So I think you began self-publishing about 5 years ago. Is that about right?
Yeah, I started working on it, my first issue 5 years ago. I'd always wanted to make comics professionally. When I was younger, I couldn't quite figure out how to do it. When I was 13 in 1986, I read the Overstreet Price Guide. The 16th edition had the Marvel 25th anniversary thing in it, and Jim Shooter, who was the editor-in-chief at the time, wrote this thing about how he got into comics. And of course, he started writing for DC when he was 13.
Yeah.
So I read that and I thought, oh, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And so I started submitting stories to Marvel when I was 13. That did not go anywhere. And
did you send
them
to Shooter?
I may have sent them, but I just got like a polite form letter back saying, "Hey, thanks. Don't send us these again." Basically. But I kept sending them.
Yeah.
And in the 90s, I was like submitting to a few different places. I actually had talked with some editors at Vertigo for a while and I had some positive feedback developing some stuff, but it just never went anywhere. And then I kind of just gave up because I was like, oh, it's just the barriers for getting into comics just seemed too high at the time. But now most of those barriers are gone, with print on demand. You can print 100 copies or 200 copies. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars for the giant print run like you used to have to
Yeah,
do.
it's significantly changed. Yeah.
Yeah. And with things like a Kickstarter and other online venues, it's much easier to distribute. You don't have to try and go get a diamond account and go through the direct market, which is another huge barrier. And so it finally seemed like with those sort of gatekeeping barriers sort of broken down, anybody can sort of make comics if you have the passion and you're willing to commit the time to do it. So yeah, about 5 years ago, I started working on the first issue of my first comic, Crimebusters #1, and I'm going strong today. Now it's sort of like gone from doing everything myself to now I'm working with multiple artists on different titles, and that's a whole different skill set I've had to learn. But it's just fun. I just love making the comics. So
So I've had an interesting day because I'd never read any of your comics up until today. And I've got a whole bunch of them in the UK, which I'm keeping half. I'm going to sell half. And so I've read from issue 1 through to issue 5 of Crimebusters today, and it's been interesting to see how it has progressed. Because issue 1, I love the covers and I think the story is fantastic, but I have to say the internal art.
yeah, it's I hadn't when I was young in the 90s, I did, I studied art. I was an art minor in college. I took some like night classes with Paul Ryan, who at the time was drawing Iron Man
Right.
and Fantastic Four. He happened to be local and was doing some night classes at a local school. So I did some training with him. But when it came to start doing Crimebusters, I hadn't drawn anything in probably 20 years, but I also had never drawn digitally. So I was trying to learn just how to do it. And for me, it took me probably 9 months to draw that first issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can see it getting better as the issue goes along. There's a certain point around issue 12 where I think the art gets better. But if you read all of the issues I did, I think by the time I get to issue 4, it's not looking too bad.
Actually, it's getting better, and I've just I'm on your Kickstarter for issue 5, so I have just looked at the digital copy of issue 5, and it really is pretty good now. I mean, it's not your
yeah,
art, but it's it's your story, and I think you'll got involved in the colouring and everything, and it really is looking extremely professional now, inside and out.
yeah. So after issue 4, I mean, I was happier with how my art looked, but it just takes me so long to draw, and I want to get the stories out faster. I'm a writer first and foremost, so that's when I ended up teaming up with the artist Mac Radwanski. So he does the pencils and the inks. And when I say the inks, I mean the blacks.
Yeah.
And then I have a flatter who does the basic colors. And for the most part, that's just about all I need, because my Crimebusters is kind of an Archie style in terms of the classic coloring and stuff. So I don't want it to be like all these fancy digital effects. But I do go in afterwards. I add some more shading in terms of like some mid grays, so it's not all just black and color, to give it a little bit of depth. And I do all the lettering, and I still do some of the variant covers. I try and have, for all of my books, whoever the interior artist is, I want them to do the regular cover, even though it's not like the distribution system I'm doing is such that people can just sort of pick whatever they want for the covers. I still have in my head that experience as a reader, where you go in, you see some awesome cover, and then you open it up and the art inside is, Al Milgrom. So I'm like, no offense to Al Milgrom, but like,
Well,
I
that's quite cruel to Al Milgrom. He was okay. Some of his stuff is okay.
yeah, he was not to get on a tangent. He's good when he has the time, but under, Shooter in the 80s, he rarely had the time to spend on that. But anyway, different. But yeah, I always want the people, when you see the cover, the regular cover, you know exactly what you're going to get on the inside. So I do still draw the variant covers a lot for my comics, but whoever's doing the inside, in this case with issue 5, it's Mac. I have him do the regular cover as well. So to give you like the truth in advertising,
Yeah.
what you see on the cover is what you're going to get on the inside. And
Yeah.
I really like his art a lot. It's like, it's not too different from mine. It
No,
has
it's
that sort of cartoony simplicity, but it has more of a, like a graphic quality. He uses a lot of heavy blacks, and there's a lot of light and shadow that I think works really well for the sort of supernatural mystery stories that I'm telling.
yeah, yeah. No, I really liked his work on issue 5, and the cover's great. Um, so quite a nice progression there. And the other title, which I think there's been 2 issues, which I have to tell you, my favourite issue of all the ones you've done so far is Uncle Sam versus Cthulhu issue 1. I think the story is absolutely cracking. There's some great characters there. I want to see more of Granny Gumshoe. I want to see more of the Lone Gun. I want to see more of Uncle Sam. It was an absolutely cracking story. I preferred the story in issue 1 to issue 2. Issue 2 is good, but I really enjoyed issue 1. It's what I'd call a ripping yarn. It's good versus evil. We've got a nice redemption story. Really fantastic read. I really enjoyed it.
I appreciate it very much. Yeah, I had a lot of fun working on that. The artist Jay Piscopo, who did both of those issues, he has a very sort of uh, he has some golden age touches to his art, but he comes from an animation background, so it's
Yeah,
a very sort of, you can see a lot of the panels, they look kind of like animation storyboards, and so it has a lot of energy. Like there's a lot of like
there's a lot of
motion
energy. Yeah,
in his art. So I thought it really worked well with that. It's set in the 1940s. Where, as you know, the cultists are trying to summon Cthulhu, and so to sway the balance of power in World War II. So Uncle Sam and his friends have to stop them. So when I was familiar with Jay's work. He's online in some groups like on Facebook that are about public domain, like golden age characters.
right.
And so I saw him on there, and I got in contact with him to do those issues, and we had a lot of fun doing both of those issues. I think issue 1, issue 2's just come out, so I haven't really gotten much feedback on it because it's only been out for a couple months.
Okay.
But people really seem to like issue 1. I do definitely do a lot better with that, like at conventions, than with Crimebusters, because there's so many Cthulhu fans, and when you see the cover, you know exactly what the story is about. And with Crimebusters, it is sort of a Scooby-Doo sort of thing, and so there are some people that get it just from seeing like the covers, but I have to do a little more explaining to people at conventions, like what the story is. But with Cthulhu Uncle Sam, they see it, there people know exactly what it is. Kind of sells itself in a way. If you're into that sort of thing, then you'll be into that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what on earth gave you the idea of putting Uncle Sam against Cthulhu? You know?
Well, this is a very this I came to it sort of a mother of necessity, I guess. Um, so like when I started doing conventions, and I only had one issue of Crimebusters, I knew that I was going to lose money at the shows because I had the table fees. And what a lot of indie people like me do to make their table is they'll do prints. And so that's why when you go to the shows and you go down Artist Alley, there's all these people, and they might have their own comics, but then they have all these prints of like Deadpool or something that they've drawn. And I didn't want to do that. I really didn't want to. I wanted to sort of do my own characters, and I didn't want to be like the 13th person with a drawing of Wolverine. I wanted to be the only person with a drawing of my stuff. So I decided that in terms of prints or anything else I was going to do, it was only going to be my characters or public domain characters. And so I started thinking, about public domain characters, like what I could do, which characters are interesting to me, what would be visually interesting. And for some reason, it's just popped in my head. I don't know exactly why. So before I had done the comic, I actually did a print. It's a I've got a copy of it here because I used it for one of my covers. It's the wrestling poster
Oh
variant
yeah.
for issue one. Um, I do have it here. Here it is. So this one here, so it's done like a vintage wrestling poster. It's Cthulhu fighting Uncle Sam. This I drew in before my first show at the beginning of 2019, and I did a handful of prints. And I sold prints, and like I still didn't make my table, but
Did better than usual.
yeah, I did much better with the prints in terms of making money than I did selling the comics. Um, and so I thought, well, people seem to really like this. I should make a comic about it. And so then I had to come up with a story. So the first issue has stuff in it where I was like, well, I did a wrestling poster. I need to have a wrestling has to be in the story to just justify why I had that cover, stuff like that. And so I kind of reverse engineered the whole thing from the poster.
Okay, that's really
And
interesting. So the poster came first, and then the
poster came first and then sort of informed the story. Um, but I really enjoyed doing it, and people seem to respond to it quite a bit. As I mentioned, the issue two's just come out. I haven't been to any shows with issue two, so I'm not quite sure yet. But I know with issue one, whenever I go to shows, I'll sell 5 times as many copies of that as everything else I'm selling combined. So people really seem to like that, and I had a lot of fun doing it, so I'm glad you enjoyed it.
No, I did. I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed issue two as well. It's just that issue one was the first one, and I really enjoyed the story, and the characters as well. And also the Fantastic Four homage cover that you sent me, because I collect Fantastic Four homage covers. So
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, so that was great. Yeah, so what's so I think you've just had issue 5 of Crimebusters. Now I know because I listened to your audio track that came out with the latest from the latest one, that you're already working on Crimebusters issue 9 or 10 or something. So we're obviously going to get more Crimebusters. When is issue 7 scheduled?
So what we're planning on doing right now is I'm hoping to do a trade first to collect the first 5
Yeah, I
issues.
heard you say that. Yeah.
And what I'm doing is like I'm having the first 3 issues colorized. I did those in black and white in part because I'm colorblind, and it was just I just didn't think I could color it because I would have to have people look at every single panel to make sure I didn't color people green, because I have done that in the past. Um, so but now that I'm working with a flatter on the new issues, I'm sending her those first 3 issues to do them in color. So I'm hoping to collect those. But right now, Mac is working on issue 6, and I think I've got 10 pages of it done already. So my hope is that this fall we'll have issue 6 out.
Okay, great.
And then, uh, you know, it's always a little hard to plan too far in advance, only because, uh, Mac is a professional artist, but he does things besides comics, and it's hard to say how fast he's going to be able to turn
Depends
in
on his
pages.
workload, I presume.
But what we're hoping to do is I want to do 3 issues a year and get on a regular schedule, and start putting out at least 3 releases a year. So there may be years where it's 2 issues in a trade, like this year. That's what we're hoping. But next year, I'm hoping to have issues 7, 8, and 9 all out next year. I
Okay.
do have like an overall storyline where I have, which will run through issue 30. With Crimebusters, with all of my comics, I try and do each individual issue as like you can read it by itself. It'll be like a full story, beginning, middle, and end. Um, but I am sort of building up, particularly when you've read issue 5. It sort of brings together stuff from the first 4
Yeah,
issues
yeah,
and
yeah.
sets up like a lot more stuff that will be going forward. It's kind of where it jumps off into the bigger story. And that's something where it was partially because I was going so slowly, I didn't want to introduce too many of those bigger elements early. But now that Mac's on board and we are going to be going faster, I thought, okay, now I can start getting into the stuff. I can start teasing stuff because now I know that that stuff's going to be coming out. I don't
Yeah,
want to.
there's a lot of teasers in issue 5.
Yeah. So I'm hoping. I just sent out the PDF to people. Was it last week, I guess? So I'm waiting to. I haven't heard really much back from people, but I'm curious to see. The tone is a slightly different issue 5 from the first 4 issues, and that has less to do with the new artist and more to do with the just this pivot in the story.
Oh well,
So
we've got Squeak in this issue.
Squeaks the monkey, yeah. So I mean, one thing we haven't mentioned is like with Crimebusters and some of the other stuff, like even Granny Gumshoe, they're I like to use golden age characters that are in the public domain. And so Crimebusters, you can certainly read it by itself. It's designed to be done that way, but it's using some of the characters and the continuity from the Golden Age series Boy Comics.
Yeah.
And so Chuck, one of my main characters, who was called Crime Buster back in the 40s and 50s, his sidekick back then was Squeaks the monkey. And he in the original series, when Chuck went off to college right at the end of the series, he sort of disappeared, which made sense to me because I was like, they're not going to let him keep a monkey in the dorm room. But I really wanted to work him in. And once I used him in issue 5, I really enjoyed writing Squeaks. I didn't think I would, but I actually really
Squeak's
liked
got
having him.
a great little backup story in issue 1, which I really enjoyed.
Oh, thanks very much.
I did.
Yeah, and I wanted to like pay tribute to the original and have the character still be around, but just logistically he didn't make
Oh,
sense to be in some of those other ones. But now that I've written him issue 5, I've definitely been thinking, okay, I need to figure out a way to get him back in the series. He'll be starting to reappear again in issue 9, but until then I don't think there's a way for me it makes sense for me to get him in. But I really liked having Squeaks. I hope people enjoy having him. As it allowed me to do a lot of stuff with Squeaks reacting to things and giving sort of um, emotional responses in panels to things that was really useful as a writer, and the little humor elements and things like that. So
Yes, he sort of acts as is visually interesting because he can be doing something in the background while something else is going on, and it just creates more interest in the picture.
yeah, so yeah, so I'm excited to do that. And I have a lot of stuff that I'm hoping to do in the future. I know I've mentioned this before, and I wasn't able to send you any of these because they don't exist yet. But I've got a new fantasy series that I'm doing called Quest.
Yeah, you
that-
mentioned that you threw that as a sort of throwaway line, but you have not seen that on Kickstarter or anywhere.
No, I have the first issue, the pencil, the art's all done. It's at the flatter right now, getting the colors. So I'm hoping to launch next month. Um, I'm a huge fan of fantasy stuff. When I first started reading comics, I wasn't into superheroes. It was all genre stuff. And
Yeah.
so some of the first comics I read after Blackhawk was Warlord and Conan, Red Sonja. I love those Bronze Age sword and sorcery comics. I love fantasy movies, video games. I play a lot of like MMOs and RPGs and stuff. So I really wanted to do that. I also wanted to have um, just tell different kind of stories, but also that sort of would appeal to a slightly different audience. Um, when I'm having this faster production schedule, because I have so far a fairly small reader base, I've noticed a little bit of fatigue on some of them because I have the same backers coming. So like if I'm asking them to do a new issue like every 2 months, some of them are sort of, they need a little space. So what I'm going to be doing, hopefully, this is the plan, is alternating. So I'll have an issue of Quest and then an issue of Crimebusters and go like that. And then every once in a while, I'm hoping to do specials. I want to do a Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam #3. I have a story in mind, but I haven't quite got it worked out just yet how that's going to go publishing wise. And I do want to do a Granny Gumshoe special. And I'm still trying to figure out, I did the where is it? The 100-page giant. Um, this is the back cover. This is the front cover. The
Oh yes, I've got you sent me that. So I've got that one with that's George Tusker and Andrew Pepoy. Yeah,
Yes. So this was a 100-page giant that I did. This is the artist edition, so there's no logo on it. And I was lucky enough to get basically an unpublished cover that a friend of mine had commissioned from George Tuska. He allowed me to use the art, so I had it inked up and colored, and then the back cover has
yeah, no,
the black and
it's
white
absolute beauty. You sent me that
original art.
one.
Yeah.
That's
So
beautiful.
this is the regular edition. This is actually the back cover. So if you take it out and flip it over, it's a flip book. So it's got Crimebusters #1 reprinted on one side in color,
Yeah,
and then the other side, I wanted to do it like the classic 100-page giants from DC. So the other side has a bunch of Golden Age reprints of Crimebuster. And there's stories that are actually referenced in my series, The Crimebusters.
yeah,
So if you read the first issue and it'll say like that happened issue 7, if you flip it over, issue 7 is reprinted on the other side, so you can read what all those footnotes are talking about. But I want to do something similar to Granny Gumshoe. I'm in the process of, she appeared in National Comics numbers 57 to 70. Very different version than my
I
version.
was going to say, you did put a Granny Gumshoe reprint in. Was it in the last? Was it in the PDF you sent out?
Yeah, it was in the PDF, right?
I didn't see her using a flying umbrella. That I thought, is that is that a Mary Poppins?
It's a bit of, she reminds me a bit of a more sinister Mary
Yes.
Poppins. But she does use a trick umbrella in her first appearance, which is where that came from.
Right.
It's more like a penguin style thing, but her first appearance, she rigs up an umbrella so it'll shoot like a sticky, like a trapster sort of sticky thing out the end of the umbrella to catch the bad guy.
Right.
So I've made a bunch of updates, but they're all based on things in the original series. Uh, and so I'm trying to get by all the original National Comics issues. You can read the scans online,
Yeah.
but for printing purposes, I don't feel like those scans are high enough quality for what I want to do. So I'm actually buying all the original Golden Age. I'm going to scan them my own copies and then digitally remaster. That's what I did with the Golden Age stories in here. I
Nice.
have a complete run of Boy comics
And
from
you
the
allowed
40s,
to do
50s.
that? Are they in public domain? Are you allowed to just reprint them without
Yeah,
getting?
they're all in public domain. So anyone can, reprint them. There's a company called Gawana Land, and all they do is take those scans from online, and they do some of their own scanning, and they just reprint Golden Age comics. But in my case, like I really wanted the scans to be higher quality, so I scanned all of my own copies
Right.
of the Boy comic stories, and then I digitally sort of remastered them to sort of take out some of the tanning and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
Um, so there's 14 issues of with Granny Gumshoe, and her stories are only 5 or 6 pages, so it's about 70 pages total. I have 12 of them so far, so I'm just missing 2. Once I get those other 2, I want to put out again like a big 100-page special, and hopefully it'll either have a new story with Granny, which is what I really want, or if I can't manage that, I might reprint Crimebusters 3, which is where she sort of comes into
Yeah.
things. Or I could potentially also do Uncle Sam #1, but I'm still trying to figure out. But I want to do a Granny Gumshoe special. I have a lot of ideas for stories with her. It's just a matter of figuring out, because I love writing her, and people seem to really like the character. So
Yeah, no, I like Granny Gumshoe. As you say, I'm slightly more sinister Mary Poppins, older Mary Poppins. Okay. I know they're all your own children. It's a bit like saying who's your favorite child, but of the issues that you've produced so far, do you have a favorite?
yeah, I'm a Crimebusters #2 is my favorite that I've done.
The
I
bride one, the haunted bride, the bride.
yes, that story, as a writer and as a comic book creator, and also as an artist who's learning, trying to learn what I'm doing. Um, Most of the issues I read, and I think this mostly worked, but there's always things in them that didn't quite go the way I had in my head. Like either couldn't get the art quite right, or like I had an idea of how the story was going to play out, and it just didn't land the way I wanted. And that's just, it's fine. Issue two is the of Crimebusters is the one story where it came out the way I wanted it. Um, and it was also a very personal story. There's a lot of stuff in there where they're talking about uh, you know, people, his family history, people in the past, like remembering the people and stuff like that. I wrote that issue right after my father died. So a lot of that is very personal stuff. And you know, the things that Chuck is going through in that issue where he's sort of really in the whole first five issues is Chuck sort of coming to terms with the death of his parents and his inability to save them. A lot of that's very, sort of personal. But issue two, like everything just came together the way I wanted it to. And even though there's a curve and the art does get better in three and four from there, I was really happy with how much better I thought the art was that I did in issue two compared to issue one.
Mhm.
So yeah, issue two of Crimebusters to me it's the most satisfying. It worked the way I wanted it to work. Um, that's what I'm always trying. Like I always have this. Even I'm not going to mention the other parts in the other issues that don't work the way I want them to work because hopefully nobody else
Who else,
noticed. But there's certain things in each issue where I'm just like, I wanted it to be like this, and it's just
But that's the case with every creator, isn't it? They're never.
yeah.
It's never as good as it could have been. That's just the creative process, I think.
And it is interesting to always hear what other people think because as a creator, you have a certain idea of how you think what you've made, but other people are going to read into it their own experiences, and so you don't really know how how the stories are going to read to other people. You only really know how they read to you. So I'm really curious I actually don't get a whole lot of feedback other than I can see from the Kickstarters that people that bought the previous issues are coming back to buy the new one. So I guess they like them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
I mean, I have to say that one, that's interesting that you said that about issue two, because that's the one I would have said of the issues that I've read was different. Okay. It had a bit more depth to it. It was a bit more complex. And now you've explained that's probably the reason why. Yeah.
yeah, and I will say, like, I'm still adjusting to the different creative process of working with someone else and working quicker, because one thing about taking so long to do the issues is I have a long time to work out a lot of minute details on everything. With issue three, I got quite a ways into the process, several months into it, and I realized that the pacing wasn't right, and I had to redo. The original version has a whole extra page that's not in the final version, and I had to condense things, and that was something where if I had like been working quicker, or with another artist, and I had just sent them like the story, I wouldn't have been able to make those tweaks. Or I would have had to try and fix it afterwards after everything's done. So having the extra time can sometimes be a benefit. Luckily, I'm not a perfectionist. I There's always going to be again things that I don't think worked, but most of the stuff works. And so that's basically a lot of times I'll get to the end of issue and I'll be like, well, it didn't quite work exactly the way I thought it was going to, but it works in its own way. I'm happy with it. And then rather than obsess over those things, I always think, well, I've got the next issue that I want to do. And so I'll learn the lessons from that, and I'll put them in the next issue, so the next issue will be better. But with issue two, there were a lot of little character things that sort of I spent a lot of time on that issue. Uh, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that's where I want to go with the stories. But you know, yeah,
So what is the what's been the biggest challenge?
boy, there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I'm sure. Which has been the biggest?
The This isn't even the right way to put it, but I was going to say the work life balance, but this is like um I'm actually like I'm a freelancer, and my comics take so much time that I'm basically have shifted into only doing part-time actual work because I have to spend so much time on the comics. Um, it can be tricky when you start doing your hobby and what you love to do as your job, because you can get burnt out. And what I've found is I love making comics. When I have when I'm doing my regular job, at the end of the day, when I want to relax, I'm going to make some comics. When I have saw a deadline on my comic,
It's like more work.
well, one thing that's found this interesting is I still get burnt out on doing that work that I have to do. But then when it comes time to relax, I still find it relaxing to work on some totally other different comic. So a lot of days I'll be working in my work time that I have set aside for the comic stuff that has to be done, like the Kickstarter stuff. That's a lot of really tedious work that's not fun. And then at the end of the evening, a lot of days I'll be like, well, I should really do this because this needs to be done. But instead, for fun, I'm going to draw the cover of Crimebusters #7, which isn't going to be out till next year. So I just spent like I've been spending a lot of time the last week, free time, relaxing time, working on covers for next year because next year is the fifth anniversary. And so all of my covers next year I've done, those Marvel 25th
Yeah,
anniversary
yeah.
frame where they have the portrait with all the characters. I'm going to be every issue I put out next year is going to have one of those, but it's all the characters from my titles around the border. So I've spent hours just, you know, getting all those little characters from all my comics around the border and formatting the graphics and stuff like that. And so it's yeah, a lot of times it's just hard to find that balance to not get burnt out, but I am finding that it's not the it's not making comics that I'm burnt out on. Working it's working. As long as I can switch to a different project and still have fun. Um, so, but yeah, the Kickstarters are they're a lot of tedious work.
I so let me put a hypothetical. Wait, it might not be hypothetical, but I think it probably is hypothetical. What if you get a phone call tomorrow and it's somebody from Marvel or DC officers, and they've said we'd really like your work, Scott. We'd like you to come and write for us. What would be your response?
Uh, well, I would say yes because I need to, money, and that sounds like a more fun um
Well, you could spend your
job.
time writing rather than having to do quite a lot of the other sort of stuff that you maybe not don't.
Yeah. So what I would probably do is I would have my work hours during the day, 6, 8 hours, whatever the block is to work on my paying work for Marvel or DC. And then in the evening, I would still make my own stuff. Um, I'm sure that's how it would go. So um, they haven't called me yet, but if they do, yeah. But I want to tell my own stories.
Yeah.
And so these are like I'm quite committed to. Again, I have that Crimebusters overall arc that I expect to go to issue 30. I'm committed to doing that, and with my new series Quest, like the first big sort of broader arc, the quest that the characters are on to start. That's going to be, I think, 12 issues, and I'm committed to doing those. I mean, I'm financially committed because I've actually got a guy who's not only is issue one already drawn, but issue two is almost done.
Oh
By
wow.
the time issue one comes out, I think my artist is already going to be partway through issue three, which is a lot of outlay of money up front for me.
So I was going to ask that with the artists, are you paying them up front or are they taking a percentage of
Yeah,
the
I'm paying them up front.
right? Okay.
Um, I don't. There's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, one of the main ones is I want the artist to get paid.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and but also you never know how things are really going to go on Kickstarter. I wouldn't feel super comfortable having someone do this much work on the hypothetical that they're going to get paid. The other thing is the creative control. You know, I'm paying them up front. They're not collaborators so much as work for hire, um, which is, you know, I'm work for hire as a freelancer, so it's fine, and they're fine with it. But it does give me more creative control. You know, I'm paying everybody to do the stories that I want to do in the way I want to do them. I think I would be open to collaborating with artists, but it's a very different sort of process
Yeah,
in terms of controlling stuff and who has the rights and all. It's a whole different thing. It's
yeah,
cleaner to do it this way.
yeah, yeah. You know, everybody knows where they are. I think. Yeah,
Yeah, and again, I can get the everyone paid up front. So um I think most artists prefer to get paid than to maybe get paid. I'm
don't we
quite
all?
sure of that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's and I presume you're using a different artist for the Quest series.
Yeah, that's been interesting too. Right. I got an artist for issue one and he's really good. And then when he finished, um, he basically told me he had other jobs and he couldn't do issue two. So he might be coming back for later,
Yeah,
when things free up. But I had to get a new artist before the series has even come out. So I have a different artist doing issues two and three. And part of it is this is the first time I'm doing a two-part story. So quest two and three are two parts of, you know. So needed to find, I didn't want to have to replace an artist in the middle of a story.
no,
So with this current artist, I had contracted him to do both parts.
right.
So it's 48 pages plus two covers, so it's quite an outlay up front.
Yeah,
Um, and then we'll see. I mean, it's interesting working with different artists on the same property too, because they draw things a little bit different. They draw the characters a little different.
yeah,
Their styles aren't too dissimilar, but I'm really curious to see what people think because I think the first artist is really good technically. Um, but the second artist maybe not so technical, but a lot of energy. So they have different strengths and stuff. The second issue, the third issue in particular, there's a lot of action. So having everything he draws is in a lot of motion, a lot of everything's moving, the camera angles, it's all. Whereas the first issue, it's more of a setup issue where you're introduced to stuff,
yeah.
and the art is more static, but it's all really like
Technically,
rendered
yeah.
and stuff. So I think it works, but it has been interesting. Sort of there was that moment when the artist told me he couldn't come back for issue two. I was like, well, what am I gonna do here? Like I have this new series I'm launching and I have to replace the artist before I've even put
But
out an issue. But I think it's gonna work out. And if it does work, which I'm pretty sure it will, it gives me more options for the future because now I've got two different people that I could bring in for stories and stuff. We'll see. I mean, as a reader, I don't love it when the artist changes, but as a creator, I'm finding, particularly when you're working with freelancers, there's a person that did the one of the variant covers for me for Crimebusters 5 who did the Trixie's Mysteries cover. Um, so I don't think I have it here.
It's okay. I'll be showing some. I'll be adding some in the edit, so I'll put some up.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was gonna say every issue I
Yeah,
do of Crimebusters, they have these variant covers that look like the Nancy Drew
yeah, yeah.
book covers. And the person that did the one for issue 5, I absolutely loved her cover. Like I loved it. And as soon as she turned it in, I was like, I immediately wrote back and said, I love this. I want to hire you. Like I've got plot, I've got scripts, whatever you want. And she was like, in between starting that cover and finishing it, she got hired to do like a whole giant graphic novel, and she just couldn't do any more work for me.
Oh,
And so that's the sort of thing where I was like, when you find artists that you really like and that are in your budget, it's like gold. And but it's hard to hang on to them
yeah,
because
yeah,
those other people are also getting a hold of them.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah. One thing I guess I would mention, because I just think it's fun, is the public domain laws here in the U.S. are a little bit different than they are in England, and in Europe. They've had all these giant corporations that have passed these laws so that the trademark, the copyright law is 95 years here. And so we had this freeze on stuff entering the public domain from the late 90s until just a couple years ago when they extended from 75 to 95 years. There was a 20-year period where nothing entered the public domain. And but as I started working on Crimebuster 6, the next issue, the Hardy Boys just entered the public domain on January 1st here in the US.
Yeah.
And so the Hardy Boys are going to be appearing in Crimebuster 6. I figured out a way to
Okay.
get them in the story. And I was just thinking about that because I mentioned the Nancy Drew book covers. She's not in the public domain here in the US yet, but she will be in 3 years.
Okay.
So sometime around Crimebusters, hopefully 13 or 14,
You're
she's
going to
going
be
to
able
be in
to
the
have
public
Nancy Drew as
domain.
well.
And we're definitely going to see Nancy Drew. As soon as she's available to me, she's going to be in the series. So it's not a big appearance of the Hardy Boys, but they're on like I think 2 or 3 pages. But if people
Is
like
the
them,
public domain stuff in the UK less time? Because I think um,
it's different. I don't. It's less time, but it has to do with when the creator died. I
okay.
think so. It's like life plus 50 years or something. So it's not
Because
necessarily
Winnie the
less
Pooh
time.
is out of it. Is so A. Milne.
Yes, we just got over here. We just got a big flood of things when they came in the public
Yeah,
domain. There's like a Winnie the Pooh Demon Hunter. There's a comic that I keep seeing where someone's doing that, and then there's a horror movie that just came out with Winnie the Pooh
yes, yeah,
murdering
yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm not necessarily a huge fan of that sort of thing, but yeah. So I was very excited to be able to use the Hardy Boys and the Crime Busters because it's one of the big inspirations for the series and influences. And so I'm hoping to get them back in the series again in a few issues once it makes sense story wise. It's for them to show up again. But um yeah, when you're working in the public with public domain characters like I am, it's always exciting. Every January 1st here in the US, we get a
yes,
new
yes.
batch, and it's like,
Who's come available?
yeah, like what can we
We
use
can't be
now?
far off. We can't be far off Superman and Batman and Mickey Mouse. Go to
Yeah,
public.
well, Mickey Mouse will be next year, I think. Um, Superman and Batman are still a decade off,
Yeah,
but they're
but
coming. They're coming.
yeah, that will be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, Scott, that's been great. Thank you for this interview. I'm going to probably get you back on when we've got some more issues to talk about. But for now, thanks very much. If you could stay on,
Thank you.
I've got some questions I want to ask you on a personal.
Yeah, absolutely.